Hey y'all, my name is Cassie and I am the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and in today's video we're doing another Instagram free pattern review. And as you can see behind me, the setup's a little different. That is because we're only going to be covering patterns about keychain sized amigurumi today. So first off, I always like to go over the criteria that I use to rate these patterns. First up, the first criteria is, would I use the pattern again? This really comes down to its market prep ability. Can I make a bunch of these in a little bit of time and be highly efficient in making them? Are they quick makes and easy to work through the pattern again and again? That sort of thing. Number two is, can I understand the pattern easily? This comes down to if the pattern is easy to read and understand for all levels of crocheters, from beginner to advanced crocheters. So the instructions are really thorough. There's photos of each step, or at least most of the steps, as well as diagrams or any additional descriptions to kind of lay out what you're doing in certain steps that might be a little bit harder to understand. And then number three is, do I like the finished product? This usually comes down to if it's a case of expectations versus reality, where you have the photo that looks really great and then the product, the finished product, that finished plushie looks nothing like that photo. We want to avoid that at all costs. So the first pattern I reviewed for this video is Winnie and Friends. This is a pattern by dannie.crochet, and this was actually recommended to me by multiple followers. So let me read them off really quickly. We had madiiison and crocheted critters _RM. Both of those followers of mine recommended this pattern to me, and I also had this pattern saved myself. I wanted to get around to testing it at some point, so here they are. You might notice that my Eeyore is not Eeyore colors. I do not have a blue or like a purple, so he's less Eeyore and more just like a mule. We've got Winnie the Pooh, and he's got some extra details on his face, like a little nose embroidery and some eyebrows. And then we also have Piglet. And all of these are fairly no-sew. You do have to make some small pieces. So for example, on each of them they have a muzzle, and you have to crochet that separately, as well as their ears. You have to crochet those separately. And then Eeyore also has a tail and a mane. I ended up just crocheting them directly into the body, but I think for the tail specifically, it wants you to crochet it separately and then sew it on, but I just opted to crochet directly off the body. The way this pattern is set up is not 3 separate patterns in one pattern. It's more along the lines of specific rows are notated what you do for different characters if you have different instructions for them. So the base pattern is Winnie, and if you have any variations in color, so for example, Piglet has a lot of color changes in that body section, so there is much more detailed instructions for how to make Piglet's color changes as well as Eeyore's color changes. And then for the ears, they all have separate instructions for the ears as well as their muzzles and any other details. So like Eeyore has his mane and tail. Those are extra things that have separate instructions, but it's all included in one single pattern. So that being as it is, there isn't like an explicit instruction about where you're supposed to place your safety eyes, but there is a note in the description about adding them between rows 9 and 10, about 4 stitches apart. When I made Piglet's ears, I did notice a discrepancy there as well. It tells you to chain 2, but I think you need to chain 3. I got this wrong in my voiceover. You're supposed to do a chain 3, slip stitch and single crochet into the second chain from the hook, and then in that last chain, double crochet, single crochet, and slip stitch. And it looks just like the picture, whereas her instructions, it doesn't seem like there was enough stitches to achieve that same ear shape as in that picture. So all that being said, I think these came out really cute, and they are kind of longer makes for this size of plushie just because you're using a much smaller yarn. There's a lot of rows for this size of plushie, but it's a lot smaller yarn, and I feel like color changes also add some time as well, especially if there's a bunch of color changes. So like Piglet, was definitely a little bit more time than Winnie was. And with that being said, I would give the pattern 4 stars out of 5. I think they come out really cute and adorable, and I'm sure they will sell well, but they will be a little bit pricier at markets, and I worry that will draw people away from actually purchasing them. The next pattern that I reviewed is the Pocket Frog by Naomi Crochet, and this pattern was suggested to me by Crochet by JJ the Boss. Thank you again, Crochet by JJ the Boss, for recommending so many patterns for me to try out. This pattern is really quick and easy, and it's actually no-sew as well. All the bobbles here, obviously you don't have to sew those on. The only thing that you really have to do is add some embroidery, pop in those safety eyes if you want. I've got 2 different kinds of safety eyes on these guys. This one has green little sparkly washers around my safety eyes, so it has a little pop of green. And then this one just has the plain black safety eyes, and I think they are both really, really cute. And they are so tiny and adorable, like perfect keychain sized little plushies. And I actually didn't have any problems with this pattern other than one thing, and it's not even a big deal at all. There's an extra row of decreases at the end, and I think that's kind of unnecessary. In my last review video, I kind of covered that when you add an extra row of decreases in some patterns, it creates kind of like a puckering effect at the bottom. If you want it to lay flat, you want to end your decreases at the same number of stitches that you started the pattern with. So say if you had a magic ring of 6 to start, I would recommend that your last row of the pattern should also have only 6 stitches in it. That will make sure that your final row stays flat and you don't have any puckering where the plushie would like stick out more down here and you wouldn't be able to keep it flat on a table or anything like that. Anyway, I really enjoyed this pattern and I would give it 5 stars out of 5. The next pattern that I have reviewed for this video is the mini snail. This was recommended to me by Fairy Mama Crochet, and it is a pattern by Yarnaholicsewciopath, and that's sociopath spelled with like sew as in S-E-W, like sewing, which is really funny. Anyway, we've got 2 of these little mini snails here for you to see, and this pattern is a no-sew pattern. Everything is kind of just worked into the crochet itself. So it's worked from, you start with the shell, you crochet this shell, then you get down to the bottom here and you create this little piece that fits underneath the snail down here, and then after that you work your yarn into the front middle 3 stitches of that bottom part of the snail, and you create a tube that creates the neck and head of the snail. And that is where it kind of gets a little bit dicey. The way that it's written is a little bit confusing. For example, it tells you to insert your hook into the middle of the middle 3 stitches on the front of row 11 and pull up a loop with the shell facing you. But I think you really need to find those middle 3 stitches and then insert your hook into the first of those middle 3 stitches instead of the middle stitch of those middle 3 stitches. That way your head is centered properly. That is what I did, and because I did that, it kind of altered where my eyes and little antenna on top of the snail were placed in the pattern. Because I did that, I had to place my bobbles and antenna differently, and so I did this for row 7. I did an antenna for my first stitch, single crochet 1, bobble stitch, single crochet 4, bobble stitch, and single crochet 1 more to achieve what I did here. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting that instruction. If the way that it's written is a little bit confusing, it's not blatantly obvious if you're supposed to pick that middle stitch of the 3, but that is how I read it and that's how I understood it. So even if that was not what she's telling you to do and you're actually being told to find that first of the middle 3 stitches and crochet into that one, the bobbles would not be placed in the right spots once you get to the bobbles and the antenna stitch. And so that's what I would recommend to do instead of that. That being said, this pattern is worked up really quick and easily, and it's fairly easy to figure out what you need to do in that area where it gets a little bit dicey and confusing. I, however, think that having to rewrite that last row of instructions for the head myself makes it a little bit less probable that I come back to this pattern in the future, being that I would have to refer to my notes every time to make sure that I'm getting to that part of the pattern and doing it correctly so that the face and the head is oriented correctly. So I would probably give this pattern 3.5 stars out of 5. Next pattern I reviewed is the donut keyring, and this is by stitchedbyninette. This is a fairly simple pattern, you'd think. However, the way that you work this amigurumi plushie up is really not something I've ever done before. So when you make this, you're basically creating a rectangle that you then sew together at the end. So as you can see here, you get to start with your base color, I believe, and then at the end of it, you're working with your top color, and you have this kind of tube shape. You kind of make it like you would be making a pair of overalls for an amigurumi plushie. So you chain a circle, well, you chain and then you slip stitch into that first stitch to create a circle, and then at the end of it you sew that tube that you created closed, so it actually becomes a circle that is hollow in the center. That was overall really confusing to me. I wasn't sure how the plushie was made or anything like that, so it was a little concerning that there wasn't a note anywhere in the pattern that said, don't be concerned, this is the way that you're going to make the plushie, or some sort of photos along the way showing you what it should look like as you make it, so that you don't feel like you're doing something wrong. Anyway, that's the only issue I ran into. You really have to trust the process, I think, and that way you get the desired end product looking like it's supposed to. But I was just a little nervous about what was going on. Haven't done the pattern before, and anyway, I would give this pattern 4.5 stars out of 5. Really nice pattern, makes these cute little donuts, really simple and easy to make, but it was just something I wasn't familiar with, and so I just wish there was that little note that said, hey, this pattern is worked differently than you're probably used to. Next up, we have the egg, and this is by therapyonmyhook. This pattern is not a no-sew pattern. You make the egg white and then you make the yolk separately and sew it on. Something I want to address immediately off the bat is I at first used the hook size that it recommended in the pattern, and this is how big mine came out, and then I changed my hook size down to achieve like the keychain sized egg, and that is why this one is a lot smaller than this one is. This smaller one, I used a 2mm hook, and I also sized down overall by removing some rows of just single crochet rounds repetitions, and the rows that I removed were 13 through 19. And then for the yoke of this little one, I also removed one of those rows to make it smaller overall. The first hiccup that I ran into when working on this pattern it doesn't tell you specifically where to place the safety eyes. It just tells you to refer to a photo that is on the same page as the instruction to place your safety eyes. So what I ended up doing was I placed my safety eyes on row 2 of that yoke, and there's just 2 rows from the edge on each side of the eyes, and row 1, which is that magic ring, is the only thing between those safety eyes.
Hey guys, Editing Cassie here. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more about the reasons I wasn't a huge fan about this pattern. I kind of wish there was some sort of indication in the pattern about the size that it comes out to working with chenille yarn. When I made mine, I invested about 40 minutes into it, and I was expecting it to be a lot smaller. So I think the photos on the front page are a little bit misleading because of the different size variations she shows there, and it's not obvious that they're not all the same yarn type.
So that being said, I would give this pattern 3.5 stars out of 5. The next pattern that I reviewed is this popping mushroom, and this is a pattern by loopsandknotscrochet. I have it in 2 different sizes here. The first one I made was in Premier Parfait Chunky, and then I went back and I used more of a chenille velvet to create a smaller one using a smaller hook. So we've got 2 different sizes here. My first note is that the eye placement, it kind of tells you to place them a little bit farther apart than I think you should. For my smaller one, I opted to place the eyes a little bit closer. That way, when it's facing one direction, you can see both eyes at the same time. Whereas this one, you kind of have to turn it side to side to see both eyes. One eye is always kind of obscured because they're so far apart, and that's just upon preference, I think. Some people might like it a little bit farther apart than the eyes that are closer together. Another thing is, I added the spots to this mushroom. They're not part of the pattern, that's just something that I wanted to do, kind of reminiscent of like a Mario mushroom more. I think the pattern creator's mushroom is more reminiscent of like a natural mushroom that you would find in the wild and maybe eat. The only other thing that I noticed was instead of telling you to do a color change in the pattern, it wants you to fasten off and then reattach with the color that you change to for the body. You start with the cap, make the cap, and then you make the body at the end. So I would really recommend that that would be changed to a color change so that you wouldn't have to completely fasten off. Instead, you would just cut the yarn, add in your color change, and continue as normal. And that would save you a little bit more time and not have to fasten off. So that being said, I think these are really cute little poppable fidgety toys, and I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. All right, last up we have the Wee Bee pattern by jessianne.crochet, and this is a tiny, tiny, tiny little bee. I don't think she tells you to work it up this small. For this little guy, I used a 2mm hook and velvet Bernat or retro velvet in Premier to make this little guy, so that is why mine comes out so tiny and small, but it's so freaking cute at how small it comes out. It's just kind of hilarious. I don't think I've ever made something like a full plushie this small in amigurumi before. It's just so cute and tiny. The safety eyes don't have an instruction at any point in the pattern where you're supposed to place them, so I kind of just eyeballed it. I think they are both kind of stuck in there at any place where it made sense with like 1 or 2 stitches apart. The only other thing that I noticed was the pattern looks like it wasn't sized correctly for Instagram, so it's a little bit cut off on the top and the bottom of the pattern, and that's just a little tiny nitpicky note. So with that being said, I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. It's really cute, and I have never seen a little amigurumi bee this small. It's so adorable. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm happy that I was finally able to get around to making a full pattern review video with only keychains in it. I felt a little bad a couple weeks ago when I picked up some keychain size patterns that were suggested by some of my followers for that video, but I was still glad that I was able to find enough keychain sized patterns to feature in this video to review. So anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that thumbs up button to let me know, and comment down below which of these patterns you're gonna try out for yourself. And if you do, make sure you come back and let me know what you think of them yourself. And with that being said, if you like my content and you want to see more in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and you can also hit that bell button if you want to be notified every single time I upload a new video. And anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you guys next week. Bye.